did actually lead you in atheism?
Well, I would have said, and I would say now, that my investigation in the world, for some reason, I've always wanted to know what's true. Truth has been paramount. It's been kind of the supreme ethic for me forever. So I was experiencing the world. I was living in the world, and I came to understand the naturalistic worldview, the idea that everything that exists comes about by a purely physical process, best explains the world around me. And that's how I thought that. That's why I thought the intellectual response was. That's what I was being taught in hindsight in school. And as I adopted that worldview and digged into that worldview, it provided me a way to live the way that I wanted to live. There were very little consequences to my actions, which led to really dark places, ultimately hard places.
But fun places.
But really, some of them were really fun. Not all of them, but some of them were fun. Did you guys ever
Dark
live
fun place? What do you mean, like an escape room?
board games? Have you guys ever played board games? They're so much fun. No, but we'd have fun. Because according to my worldview, there are no consequences for my actions.
Right.
In an ultimate sense. So I could do whatever I want.
Yeah, for sure.
But what happens is if you really lean into that, if you own that worldview and try to live it consistently to its logical consequences, you find out that it doesn't work, functionally speaking. It just doesn't work. It's not practical. Not only can it not explain fundamental features of the world around you, it doesn't work. Relationships get broken. And what I realized is I was leaving in my fun.
Yeah.
I was kind of leaving a little wake of destruction behind
A trail of broken bodies.
Broken people, man.
Yeah.
Just broken everything, broken jobs, broken people, broken whatever, because there was no consequences.
Yeah.
So I did what I wanted. I said before this, I speak a lot on suicide right now, has been a topic of focus. And I remember I had a friend who died by suicide in high school. Well, we were out of high school. He was a friend in high school. And I remember my sister telling me he died. And my response was, well, okay, who cares?
Jeez.
Like, who cares? Because at bottom, life is meaningless. And I was really trying. That was towards the end of my...
You were trying to be consistent.
I was really trying to be consistent. And I think when you read the atheists and they're being consistent, they say this, right? Dawkins, nothing but pitiless indifference is what Dawkins says. Dawkins says there's no morals, there's no right and wrong, there's no justice.
That's right.
Pitiless indifference. Thomas Hobbes and Leviathan, life is solitary, poor, brutish, and nasty.
Nasty.
Yeah,
it's interesting because if you live that out really consistently, murder, rape, all those things are just amoral actions and they don't really have any consequences. There's nothing. Yeah. So why would they ever have a problem with any of those actions in the first place?
That's right. And it's important to make the distinction here that we're not, at least I'm not, you guys can argue whatever you want. I'm not arguing that atheists think rape is good, right?
No.
What I'm saying is that the worldview of naturalism can't tow that freight. They can't they can't shoulder the burden of an objective morality. At best, they can say it goes against cultural convention. Maybe it's taboo.
Yeah.
But they can't say it's actually wrong.
That's right. There's no.
And you alluded to this. I think, to their credit, I don't think it's a good way of living, but they are intellectually consistent in that. There are atheists who try to impose some universal morality or say there's right and wrong, which I think is hard to argue for without a God or some universal good.
Yeah, if you have the saying is a moral law requires a moral lawgiver.
That's right.
And actually, that was one of the things that led to my ultimate conversion. One of the I call them bumps in the reality, because the world is a certain way, right? It doesn't. What I mean by that is it doesn't bend. The world doesn't change according to your emotions, your likes or dislikes. And so reality is the way the world really is. So when you don't live according to reality, you bump into it, and some of those bumps, they hurt. And the bump of a moral depth, I call it the bump of bad, that hurt because you start to realize, oh, wait a second. There is a fundamental feature, a moral depth to reality. And there's brokenness out here that we all complain about, right? There's brokenness out in the world when we know everybody uses Nazi Germany, right? Everybody uses Hitler because he's awful, right? So when I said what happened in Auschwitz was wrong, what was I saying? As an atheist, I was kind of just saying it's the same thing as saying, Brussels sprouts are gross. And Nazism's bad.
Except for
it's the same
Kanye.
indifference as your friend dying, but on a massive scale.
On a more obvious scale, yeah. And then
Except for Kanye, he doesn't use Hitler that way.
Yay, is that what Yee?
He loves
Hitler.
but he loves the Jews
now.
also.
Well, now.
Does he?
That's what
Did
he
he say
said.
that recently too?
He said them both in the same sentence.
Oh, that's right. I love Hitler and I love the Jews.
That's what he said.
Don't take that out of context, please.
When you are Kanye,
Yeah.
you can say whatever you want, apparently.
So what that gets you to kind of an understanding of that there might be a God, there might be something beyond this.
Well, there has to be something beyond me,
beyond you.
because I came to the realization that I would complain about the brokenness out in the world. I would complain about Hitler. I complain about the girls who dumped me, right? I complain about if somebody...
I'm Christian, I still complain about that.
Well, absolutely, because that's a fundamental feature of reality, right? But you have a grounding for that. But then what hurts? What hurts is when you realize the brokenness isn't just out there. The brokenness isn't here.
No, it's just them.
Yeah, it's just them. I'm just a victim, right? Right? No, but I'm a victimizer. You know what I mean? Like, and that's when I started realizing, oh shoot, like the way I'm living, it's not just wrong. It's like I'm wronging people.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I thought I was a great guy. Mm-hmm. You know, I thought I was doing all this good.
Right.
But in reality, I was actually, I was hurting people. I was hurting myself. I wasn't contributing to society in the way that I thought I was.
Yeah.
And that hurts. You know, when you realize that, you're like, oh man.
So you had this revelation that you're hurting people that kind of brought you to a sense of there's something transcendent out there, but there's 4,000 different religions around the world. So how did you end up landing on Christianity?
Yeah, that's a great, so a multiple of factors, right? So a belief system is only as good as the evidence for the belief system, right? So I didn't just wander right to Christianity. At the time I was dating a girl, my now wife, Rihanna. The way I say it is, the way I always begin the story is my story begins as all good stories do with I met a girl. Gentlemen, we will do anything.
That's right.
To win the affections of a lady, even go to church, you know, and my wife asked me to go to church with her. And so I went with her and it was crazy. It was weird. But what happened is I realized through there were bumps, there were things in my life going on. I was realizing there were fundamental components of reality, morality being one of them. But then also at that same time, I was forming relationships with people who were actually like real Christian. And they were cool.
And you'd never met real Christians before.
No, I mean, I don't want to say that because I think I probably knew some, but if I found out you were a Christian, I'd be like, hey, we got to go get coffee. Or can I buy you a beer? Because like, I need to destroy you.
Real Christians don't drink.
Real Christians don't drink.
So you were an evangelical atheist. You would go out there and try to convert people to atheism.
Totally, man. I was passionate.
Oh, that's interesting.
I was totally passionate.
You were an evangelical atheist.
Absolutely. And I would be out there, and if I found
I
out,
just said that 2 seconds ago.
You said evangelical.
Well, he doesn't listen.
Atheist.
Oh.
Is it
You can hear Dad laughing.
The point of a conversation is waiting for your space to talk, isn't it? You don't actually know.
I can't remember what I was thinking about, but I wasn't thinking about what you were saying.
No, we want to hear about you being an evangelical atheist. The idea
I'd love that, you know. And
Adam thought of it.
And I'd love talking to people about important things. I always have. I worked at a law firm, a really great law firm, very prestigious, really great casework. And I liked arguing. I liked that world. So if I found out you were a Christian, I figure, oh, well, we have a lot to talk about, how I'm right and you're wrong. And I'm going to show you why your God is a vindictive.
Now,
so that's what I would say. I'd try to pick on the religion. I'd say what everybody says. And I bring up problem of evil, ultimately. And what's interesting is in hindsight, I bring up the problem of evil. But the atheist who brings up the problem of evil, if you think about it, they don't actually do anything. And this is what happened to me. I wasn't doing anything to solve the problem. The problem of evil is a problem because we all recognize that there's evil. There's an oughtness to the world, and things aren't as they ought to be. And so when you get rid of when you bring the objection up, you assume there's an oughtness, and getting rid of God doesn't do anything to solve the problem. It just gets rid of one of the possible solutions.
Right.
So at the end of the day, in the dark of night, when I was in my own head, I still had the problem. You know, as an atheist, I still had the problem, and I couldn't wrestle my way out of it, you know, because it was constantly there. And then you combine that, like this is like you start combining that. Well, what am I doing when I'm wrestling with the problem of evil in my own mind? What exactly is that? That was another bump for me, the bump of me, the existence of the soul, consciousness. When I'm thinking to myself, what exactly is it that I'm doing? Because I would have said it's just chemicals, a chemical reaction. Wait, no, it's not. Because the law of identity, right? The chemicals that are interacting are not the same as the thoughts. Like when you have a song stuck in your head or an idea stuck in your head, like I can't like cut your skin open, crack your skull, and then take the song out, right?
Yeah.
There's no song.
These chemicals are come together.
It doesn't
work.
That doesn't describe reality. That's not the way the world really is.
No.
So I was wrestling with all of this stuff. At the same time, that like right around that same time, my future in-laws, they gave me my first Bible, a New Believer's Bible, edited by Greg Laurie, Cornerstones of the Faith, who is Satan, who is Jesus, what is sin? And I read that cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation, over the course of 3 months. I used to ride the train to work. I worked in downtown. I was living in Hollywood, so I just take public transit. And the way I look at it is God used the intellectual side of the faith through Christian Apologetics, that book and more, to kind of cause fissures, cracks in my naturalistic worldview. Mm-hmm. And then he filled those cracks with the water of the gospel. Through the word. I had a direct encounter with the word of God that filled those cracks, and he froze in.
Did you even find like the minor prophets good, or did you skim those?
I skimmed a lot, but I did find actually a lot of that stuff was really interesting to me because. So here's the deal: is when I'm reading these stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I would have said they were just myths, but as I was reading them. I'm like, this doesn't sound like a myth.
That's right.
And then I realized, oh wait, the authors, they're actually saying it's supposed to be true. It doesn't read like myth. Like I don't understand, And then I started looking in because I had the apologetic stuff going on the side. Wait, is this real? Like, let's look at the historicity of this stuff. And I started looking at Gary Habermas and Mike Licona and all of these things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually true.
Yeah.
An atheist says that they've read the Bible. More often than not, they do not mean that they have thoroughly read the Bible. They don't mean that they've read 66 books of the Bible, authored by dozens of authors over the course of 1,500 years with a unifying message and central theme that there is a Messiah, that humanity is fallen, that we need Jesus. They don't mean that they've read even one or two of the Gospels in their entirety. What most atheists mean when they say that they've read the Bible is that they've seen excerpts criticized by other atheists, and they're quoting those same passages which these other atheists are criticizing. Now, let's consider this. They are then condemning the moral actions of God. And while they're condemning the moral actions of God, they are reflecting the image of God. They are reflecting themselves as an image bearer of God, our Lord God Almighty, by having this moral code, which they're referring to. They're borrowing capital from Christianity in order to critique it. Their worldview has no moral oughts. And so then atheists will say, are you saying I can't be a good person? First, what do you mean by good, right? I mean, it's a good question, but what do you mean by good? By good, are you referring to some standard that we all kind of agree on, that hurting other people is wrong? Would it be wrong for evolved sea scum? Why would it be wrong for the descendants of bacteria to do anything to any other descendants of bacteria? It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Now, if we want to consider the evidence for Christianity, this is a book which was written by the founder of Harvard Law. Joan Greenleaf, the founder of Harvard Law, wrote this book, An Examination of the Testimony of the Four Evangelists by the Rules of Evidence Administered in Courts of Justice. Ex-ATHEIST, an investigative homicide detective, wrote Cold Case Christianity, and both of these review the gospel accounts as with the same standards as one would consider testimony and evidence in court. Now, question: why would they reach the conclusion based on this analysis that Christianity was true if it's mere fairy tales? Is it possible, if you're an atheist watching this, that you might have some more investigating to do? I'd recommend it, especially if you're going to go on acting like moral oughts truly exist, when atheist philosophers time after time have reflected that, of course, without a God, without a moral law, we're all just evolved sea scum bumping and breaking each other At bottom, there is no good, there is no evil, just blind, pitiless indifference. None of that actually adds up with the way that our minds and consciousness work. Doesn't add up, Jim. Christ is king. Every knee will bow. Absolutely.